We're going to be talking about the last section of Unit 4, which is on a system of linear inequalities. Now, up to this point, we have talked about linear inequalities, graphing a line, whether it's solid, whether it is dashed, and then which side of that line we are going to shade, whether it's greater than, whether it's less than. Okay? With a system, now if you remember back at the beginning of this unit, we talked about a system of linear equations, which is where we had like two lines that would intersect and we were finding that intersection point. Well, with a system of linear inequalities, it's a little bit different. What we're going to be looking at, if I kind of draw a quick example here, is we are looking at a situation where, say we have an inequality where it's a solid line and we are shading above that line. And then on the same graph, we also have, say, a dashed line where we're also shading above that one. And what we end up having is we have an overlap of those shaded regions. And that overlapping section is what we are looking for. We are looking for the overlapping section of those two inequalities, and that's where our solutions are going to be, okay, when we're dealing with a system. So, the solution to a system of inequalities is where the shadings overlap. And so if we take a look at another example here, right, this is just a general example of what we're going to be looking at today. But if we look at this specific one that we have two inequalities. Let's start with the first one. Y is greater than 2x plus 2. We have a y-intercept at positive 2. We have a slope of 2 over 1. And this inequality is going to have a dashed line because it's not equal to. And before I shade, I'm actually going to draw the other inequality on here at the same time. So this has a y-intercept at negative 5 with again a slope of 2. And this one is going to be a solid line. Okay. Now, if we look at our shading for our pink line, y is greater than 2x plus 2. That is above the line. So we're going to shade above the line. And if we look at the blue one, it says y is less than or equal to 2x minus 5. That is below the line here. So what we end up having happening here is we end up having two parallel lines, right? So we know the lines are not going to intersect, but neither do our shaded regions. So we end up having no solution here. Now, one of the things is I don't want you to get confused. Just because we have parallel lines does not mean that we're always going to have no solution. We could have an intersection of parallel lines where the first line we are shading above and the second line we are also shading above. So there is overlap in here. Okay, so it all depends on what the inequalities say. All right, so this is what we're going to be looking at today. So if we take a look at it, and we're only going to do a couple of problems with this, and then we're going to take a look at Desmos along with this. So if we take a look in our book, I believe we are on page 94. Either 94 or 96 in section 4.5. We're going to graph these inequalities. So I'm going to make my grid on here. So I'm actually going to use Desmos in order to see where these points need to be. Because remember, Mr. Gerke showed you guys how to use Desmos in order to graph these inequalities. So we can use that from here on out, especially with a system of inequalities or a system of equations. So we have y is less than 2x. So if I pull Desmos up, and remember, you want to type it in exactly as it looks. So we have y is less than 2x. So we can see on here that we have a dashed line because it's strictly less than, and it is below that line. So let's find a good point. We have 0, 0, and we have the point 1, 2. So let's plot both of those points. So we have 0, 0, and we have the point 1, 2, and it's going to be a dashed line. Okay? Then we have the inequality of y is greater than negative 3. So if I do that on here as well, y is greater than negative 3. I did less than. Let's make sure that we do the right ones. There we go. That looks better. So we have y is greater than negative 3. Now in Desmos, if we uncheck the first one, we can just look at the second inequality there. So we can see we have a horizontal line that's dashed down at negative 3. So I can do a horizontal line that is dashed down at negative 3. So we have our two lines. Now what we are looking for, and on your test and on your homework, all we need to focus in on is where the overlapping shaded region is. And we can see here on our screen, we have 4 regions that this graph is split up into. Top left, top right, bottom left. And if you have a hard time seeing where the overlapping region is, just uncheck one of them and then see where it's going to overlap when you keep checking and unchecking it. And we can see that the overlapping region is this top right section. So on our grid, we are going to shade in this top right section. Okay, that's where the solutions exist. All right, so let's do the same thing with B. Okay, so I'm going to go into Desmos and I'm going to delete these two. We have, let's just move this over here. There we go. We have y is greater than or equal to negative 2x plus 1. Y greater than or equal to negative 2x plus 1. So we have a solid line. We've got the point 0 or 0.50, which we don't like, but we have the 0.01, and we also have this point down here. We have 1, negative 1. So let's use those. So let's use the 0.01 and 1, negative 1, and this is going to be a solid line. And then our second one, y is greater than x plus 2. Y is greater than x plus 2. Let's uncheck the first one. We have important points at 0, 2 and negative 2, 0. So we have 0, 2 and negative 2, 0. And again, this is a dashed line. And if we put both back on, we can see, again, there are 4 sections to our graph. We have the left, top, right, and bottom, and the overlapping section for this one is going to be the top section. So we are going to shade in our top section. Okay? And that's what we're focusing in on. That's what we're doing here with a system of inequalities. Now, there's only a handful of types of questions that I could ask you on your test. One of them being, hey, here's the system. Which graph matches up to that system? So you would just have to graph it and find the one that matches up to it. Another one would be, here is a point A. Place A somewhere in the solution set, and you would just have to pick a point that is somewhere in that overlapping region, right? So if I wanted you to put A somewhere in the solution set, we would want to find just a point in there, and we just click and drag it, okay? So use that. Use Desmos for sure when you're working on your homework. Have a split screen, have it open on there. Double check in Desmos. Please make sure that you're doing your dashed lines correctly, your solid lines correctly, and you're finding the space where they overlap, okay? Not everything, but just the space where those two shaded regions overlap. All right. If you have any questions, please reach out to me. Please let me know. We do have our practice test on Monday with our Unit 4 test on Tuesday. So let's prepare, let's study, and let's do well on this test coming up. Have a great rest of your day.